Hey friends, welcome to the Durango Vineyard. Hey, when I was growing up, my grandparents had a poster on the back of one of their bedroom doors, which happened to be the door or the place that I stayed when we would stay there. And frankly, this poster scared the bejesus out of me. It was that picture, maybe you've seen it before, of Uncle Sam pointing his long finger and saying, "We want you." Basically this poster came from, I think it was World War II, and it was a time when America had this huge goal. I mean, goal's probably the wrong word. They had to defend themselves, and think about being the government. They had to recruit people to fight in this war that could come with a tragic ending. I mean, talk about a difficult thing to recruit people to. And in some ways, I wonder if that was why the intensity of the poster. Well, it just reminded me kind of the current season that we're at the Vineyard. I'm so pumped that on June 2nd, we're starting our new, back to church as normal sort of thing. And with that, we need volunteers. We need you. So think of that picture. Don't stress out about how scary it is, but I would love for you to participate and volunteer in one way at the Vineyard. So along with our emails this week, I've sent out something that allows you to just sort of respond and say, this is where I can help out. Please consider filling that out, doing your part for our church to help us reach the city. God bless you guys and enjoy the sermon today. Have you ever been an outsider? Try to remember with me exactly what it felt like to be on the outside of a group. Or, maybe it was in high school or middle school, maybe it's now in some way. But I just want you to picture, what does it feel like to be on the outside? Today, we're talking about reaching out. We have said that our vision is to reach up to God, that is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then the second part of our vision is to reach out, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Today, and in this series, we're trying to make it practical. What does it actually mean to reach out? Last week, we talked about Jesus being one who reached out to those within his community. That was a fellow Jew who had leprosy. Today, we're talking about a Roman soldier who was by very definition an outsider of the faith community. Let's go ahead and read a little bit about this story now. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him. "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." And he said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied, "Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof. But only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, and soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and the other, 'Come,' and he comes. And to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, "Truly, I tell you, no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob at the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you as you have believed," and the servant was healed at that very moment. This is a story about Jesus interacting with an outsider. First, we have to understand what a centurion is. Now, in that day and age, a centurion would have been a soldier who was in charge of 100 other soldiers. And as you might know, the Jews were occupied by Roman influence or control during the time of Jesus. That means a foreign country was in charge of the Jews. And the centurions were bad mamma jambas. They were the best of the best soldiers. They were the ones that would have gone up through the ranks. They would have had to be usually a soldier for 15 to 20 years before they'd be appointed to be in charge of this group of soldiers. And even more than that, they would have been a part of a group called the Legion, and they would have led with other centurions the Legion together. And so when I was researching this, what's so interesting is we find that the centurions had to do this delicate balance of justice and cruelty in many cases. And then on the other hand, leadership and motivation. It was said about centurions by the historian Polybius, centurions are required not to be bold and adventurous so much as good leaders of steady and prudent mind, not prone to take offense or start fighting wantonly, but able, when overwhelmed and hard pressed, to stand fast and die at their post. Centurions would have been feared in this time. And so the fact that the centurion approaches Jesus, I'm sure the crowd around him would have been skittish. I talked about this last week, how the leper would have caused the crowd to be skittish. So too, the centurion. I mean, it's kind of like that popular complex, or that, have you ever met somebody who is, like they're famous and you get nervous around them, and what do you say? I'm sure we all have a story of sort of bumping into a famous person and not knowing how to interact with them, right? That's what a centurion would have been. They would have been revered and feared. And what's amazing about this story is this centurion demonstrates something that Jesus says, even in the Jews, within the people of God, he hadn't seen at all. I want to dig into two sort of ideas or pieces of the puzzle of this centurion. The first one was his faith. Jesus marveled that this outsider had the kind of faith that was, it was unique. It was even more so than those people who had been following God. It made me think, well, what is faith anyway? Faith, by definition, in Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. In other words, and if you read Hebrews 11, you'll kind of catch this idea. Faith is the thing that allows us to believe that the person of God is going to protect us as we do things in life that are difficult or challenging. And so you look through Hebrews 11, and it's like the Hall of Fame of faith. And it says Moses and Abraham and all these different people. Here's what they did because they believed that what God said to be true was true. Then the Hebrew writer, after this section, he goes on to say, therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. And let us run with endurance the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of God. This centurion had an amazing faith. And this faith was demonstrated in that he could come to Jesus and he could say, Jesus, I trust that you can heal my servant, even though I don't even need you to come to do it. Faith is this connection point. It's this in-between. And what I find fascinating about the story is who had the faith in this story. I mean, it was an outsider. He was a Roman. He was not a citizen. He wasn't a Jew. He would have been born in Rome, and he was there just occupying and protecting and sort of pushing out the influence of Rome. Okay, let's translate this, because ultimately we're reading this story with an eye for our church and in our world. And the first thing I see is faith is not exclusive to our church. Let me even say it broader. Faith is not only exclusive to Christians. I don't know if that's hard for you to hear or not. I mean, a lot of times we tend to think that we have a hold on faith. It's ours. We're the only ones that can have faith. But what we see here is that Jesus knew that God came to reach out to everybody. And therefore, those who are outside of faith still are born with faith within them. And Jesus was on the lookout. He was always looking around to see what God was doing. And in this case, he was doing it in an outsider. Now, we'll get to this in a little bit, but I think the obvious point here is, do we see and are we looking for faith in the people outside of our churches? Okay, the second thing is that he was a Roman Gentile. Listen to this. As Jesus, I read this already, but I found this so fascinating. Jesus said, "Truly, I tell you that no one in Israel I have found such faith." And then he goes on to say, "I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." Let's pause there for a second. Many will come from outside the confines of our Jewish religious sect, right? Many will come from the outside and they will end up in heaven reclining with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I wonder what this means, I wonder if it means that Jesus and his message is more inclusive and far-reaching than we maybe even know. But Jesus drives this point home even more. And he says something that's actually troubling. He says, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into the utter darkness. I say often that just because you're in a garage doesn't make you a car. And there is a warning here that is a challenge in our faith. And that challenge is just because we're in a church doesn't make us a Christian. Just because we are in the group of people, right? Or in the club or in the popular crowd, it doesn't make us, in these terms, connected to God. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about something I've been thinking about, and that is the exclusivity versus the inclusivity of the gospel. I mean, on one hand, you could read this and go to the extreme that it's almost like Jesus, didn't need people to be in the church or be a part of the kingdom to be a part of the kingdom. You could almost get this and say to an extreme, well, maybe just everybody gets there someday. Here's a Roman, and he's a centurion, he's a soldier. He's about as far from the Jewish idea of what, not at that, Jew at that time. Now we could say Christian, but, he was far away and yet he was connected. He had faith, right? So on one hand, I think you could go to an extreme and say, well, maybe God just sort of rescues everybody. He saves everybody. But on the other hand, I think we have to look also at the story and see that this man experiences healing through Jesus. In other words, regardless of where he ends up and what his faith meant, in this moment, he was introduced to the person of Jesus, and it was through Jesus that his servant was healed. So here's a good man. Clearly, he's a good leader. He has empathy for his servants. He cares about his servants, which in some ways was unusual for these centurions at the time. But he needed to go through Jesus to experience the healing for his servant. And I think the same is true for our world. I don't know how you think this whole thing shakes out in terms of heaven and hell. And obviously, it's a big question and a big idea when it comes to outsiders. And for centuries, some Christians have stood on the playing field of we've got to get people saved, and they're doing everything they can to get people into the kingdom. Other Christians have been more passive, saying God will save who he wants and he will condemn who he wants. And I don't know how that all works, so I'm just going to sort of sit back. But regardless of that, what I see and what I want to invite us and challenge us to is this centurion was given healing for his servant, and the faith was expressed through Jesus. More and more, what I'm finding that I want our church to be about is I want to introduce people to the person of Jesus. I want them to meet God personally. I want them to hear God speak his love over them and prophetically speak his love right into their life. I want to see God touch people and have them experience God. And I'm really less interested in, sort of where does this all turn out someday? I want people to know God now. As we close, I've got a couple practicals, ways that I think we could maybe be this influence, but I'm sure that I've stirred up some thoughts that you will enjoy talking about with your group. First, in terms of practicals, when it comes to outsiders in our community that are not a part of our faith community, First of all, I want to challenge you to see the good. It's so easy to see the negative. It's so easy to divide ourselves and push ourselves away from people. And what I want to encourage you to do is just like Jesus, he saw the good in that person, that centurion. I mean, I love the phrase Jesus says, or the writer says, Jesus marveled. What if we marveled at the people around us and had that kind of curiosity and excitement about people, seeing the good in people? It goes into the next thing, and that is looking for faith. That's my second practical. Look for faith in the people around you, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, your family. I mean, look for faith. Don't look for the things that drive them away. When you see things that demonstrate faith, that are even maybe like in concentric, they're close to the kingdom of God, point those out. Marvel at those. And finally, would you be bold enough, this is the third thing, to introduce people to the person of Jesus? How do you do that? You can pray for people. I said this last week. It's so powerful to stop in any moment and say, can I pray for you right now? That is such a powerful way to sort of point people to Jesus. Another way, invite people to church and say, I want you to meet this Jesus that's changed my life. Another way, tell your story. Tell your story of how Jesus has touched you personally. And don't go heavy on the apologetics that prove you're right. Go heavy on your personal experience of how God spoke to you in the midst of your own darkness. I'll close by just sharing that at our home group lately, I have experienced so much joy. I've been re-encouraged to pray for people, and we've been doing that. We've been closing our home group by just saying, can I pray for you? And what I love about this is it's just a moment for the person you're praying for to meet Jesus. At the end of the day, that's what I want. I want people to meet Jesus, hear from him, connect with the Holy Spirit, find holiness and reverence before God, fall on their face in worship of him. And you and I can be a part of that for outsiders. Let's be this kind of community. God bless you. All right, it's question time. Here's the first question. What are examples in the Bible of God being a personal God? All right, second question. In what ways can you see faith in our secular culture? And finally, I want you to just share personally, what are some best ways you've learned to introduce people to the person of Jesus? God bless you.